everyone, and welcome to Talking Out a Line. As you know, this show is about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across different industries. In today's episode, we'll be looking at sustainability as a field and specifically focusing in on the world of marine sciences. Today's guest is Professor Alifa Huq, and we'll be talking about her work in marine conservation and the challenges that she has faced as a woman in this field in a global realm.
Professor Alifa is an impressive deep field researcher in the University of Oxford and assistant professor in the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh. She is currently conducting a case study on sharks and reefs in Bangladesh. With her research, she's not only trying to protect endangered species, such as the saw shark, but she's also trying to find a way to make the fishing industry more sustainable.
Conservation is not a goal to achieve, but a path to follow. And Professor Alifa finds it important to educate communities and fishermen in order to protect the ecosystems, which are crucial for them to make their livelihood, and let them have a voice in future policy and decision-making as new laws are being implemented. So she really truly believes in communities speaking in and contributing to laws, which I think is a really noble intention. Her work can be seen as groundbreaking for many women across the world. Without having many predecessors before her, she has seen different challenges and experienced many kinds of discrimination as a woman from Bangladesh in an industry that is mostly dominated by white males in a global realm. Now she's trying to redefine what it means to be a woman in this global sustainability industry and build a path for others to follow.
Now for some global statistics about the importance of sustainability. There's four major pillars of sustainability: social, human, economic, and environmental. In a worldwide study conducted in 2020 by Pew Research, majorities see that at least some effect of climate change where they live. A median of 58% say government action to address climate change is insufficient.
Now about consumption and sustainability. In 2022, consumers are 26% more likely to buy from sustainable sources than they were in 2020. I'm really happy about that because currently I'm working on a book in this world of sustainable and inclusive consumption and big business practices. So I'm really happy to see the statistic. Food waste and loss also occurs at different stages in developed and developing countries. And now we're going to be finding out about the consumption and sustainability behaviors of food waste. In developing countries, hear me out, it's 40% of food waste occurs at the post-harvest and processing levels, while in developed countries, 40% of food waste occurs at the retail and consumer levels. So it seems like food waste is happening in both developing and developed countries, but it's interesting to note that they're happening at very different stages of the production process.
In the U.S., more than 50% of all produce is thrown away. This is done because it is deemed too ugly to be sold to consumers. This amounts to more than 60 million tons of fruit and vegetables being thrown away each year. Now for species and biodiversity, the population sizes of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians have experienced a decline of an average of 68% between 1970 and 2016.
Well, more than 500 species of land animals are on the brink of extinction and are likely to be lost within 20 years. And the same number that we lost over the whole of the last century. So that is looking pretty bleak for our ecosystem. Now for people, 1.1 billion people worldwide lack access to water. That's just unacceptable and a really big number, and a total and it just makes me wonder about the different ways in which we take our water supply in the United States for granted. And a total of 2.7 billion people find water scarce for at least 1 month of the year. Again, it's hard for Americans to conceive of that problem. By 2025, 2/3 of the world's population may face water shortages. We are truly lucky here in the US.
Yeah, that's for sure, because over 3 billion people depend on the ocean for their livelihoods. Coastal eutrophication is expected to increase by 20% in 2050, while roughly 80% of the population in the coast and ocean originates from land. 37% of people in the world live in these coastal areas. Proportion of world marine fish stocks within biologically sustainable levels declined from 90% in 1974 to 69% in 2013.
Wow. So I guess it's a pretty big of a mixed bag. So some of this was trending in the direction that us environmentalists and people who care about sustainability would be happy with, but some of these are pretty shocking and eye-opening, and hopefully it lets people know about the privileges that some of us have that are located in developed nations like the United States, where we don't really need to spend even one day of our lives having to worry about water. Now that we've gotten a snapshot about the huge world of global sustainability, let's jump into this amazing interview between me and Professor Alifa Huq to find out more about her world and her take on inclusion and sustainability. Thank you all for watching. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the cool work that you do around the world.
Thank you very much, Vadia, for inviting me. It was a pleasure and an honor when you told me that we're going to do this. So as you said, I do wear a few hats. I am doing my PhD research at the University of Oxford, and also my affiliation goes back actually from Dhaka University, which is a university in Bangladesh and where I belong, and also I work in. So I do look at a few problems. Basically, I'm looking at marine conservation in the global South context. I work with fisheries and fisheries communities to try and understand how sustainability in terms of fisheries would look like in a global South country. And my case study is sharks and rays. It's pretty cool. We do have a lot of sharks and rays in Bangladesh. And I'm trying to understand how these marginalized communities can be introduced and can be incorporated into the core policymaking and decision-making process. Yeah.
Sounds good. So tell us a little bit about the highlights of your work. I know you've given us a bit of an introduction. What are some signature examples of where to find your work and what has happened in the last few years for you?
Sure. I mean, I just want to tell first that it's extremely difficult for one person or a person with a very small team to juggle around so much. So I wouldn't say that we have like a dedicated website at Still where you can find our work, but we do try to give a lot of time in terms of social media presence. So you could find my works in my pages, as I said, my work actually deals with a lot of field work. So what we actually do in a small team, within a small team in Bangladesh, is go around into the coastal areas of Bangladesh and conduct a lot of social science researches along with a lot of natural science researchers as well. So as I said before, that I do look at sharks and rays in Bangladesh. So currently in Bangladesh, we run a few projects, and I'm going to give you a little bit about what's going on in this project. So far in Bangladesh and around Bay of Bengal countries, we do not have a lot of understanding and data regarding sharks and rays, their fisheries, people, policies. It's a lot of, vacant space. You wouldn't find a lot of literature and work to base on new researches. So what we did in the last 4 years was trying to create that baseline. So we conducted a few different research projects. The first one looked at the timeline and the past of shark and ray fisheries in Bangladesh. So we conducted more than 1,500 questionnaire survey around the coastal region of Bangladesh, asking around fishers, trying to understand what was happening up until 2000s, which we didn't have any idea about. And we also have at least 20 local data collectors around more than 11 landing sites from the whole coast of Bangladesh, collecting data every day, at least 15 to 20 days a month on the everyday landing to try and see what species we have, who are catching them, how are they doing, and all that. But one significant project which I personally am very proud of and very keen about is that we look at one charismatic species that Bangladesh has, which is a globally critically endangered species called the sawfish. More than 30 countries already declared them extinct, but Bangladesh still have them. So we're trying to encourage fishers to release this particular species alive. So we are creating a lot of education materials. We are actually doing a lot of campaigns, all of that based on our research that we have done in the last 3 years. Some of our work is actually being exhibited in the American Natural History Museum, and I'm going to share the link with you so you can post. It's still there. It's going to run till August this year. Anyone can go and see. Apart from that, our work profiles are featured in one of our funders pages like Save Our Seas Foundation, Shark Conservation Fund, National Geographic, and ZSL Edge Fellowship pages. So yeah.
Sounds good. Looks like you're doing the work that few people know about in terms of detail and depth. So it leads me to asking the most natural question, that there's a lot of bias sometimes about the field of environment. I did my PhD in environmental communication and sustainability, and it's largely populated in the West with men and white men. And then, of course, the second to that would be white females. So being a Bangladeshi woman, I'm curious to know what got you in this field, and how do you feel yourself to be part of this field in not only Bangladesh, but in a global realm, since you're doing your DPhil and a lot of your research work in Oxford as well?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like any other environmental sector, or actually any other STEM science, right? You would be seeing that bias, even in shark sciences, and it's published that most of the researchers are white males, and most of the research which get much highlight and much importance are from the global north.
And much funding. The funding background is much
absolutely.
easier.
Because they have that network, they have this access. It's so many problems around that, and that's true for shark science in the global south as well. But when I started, this wasn't my core goal to eliminate all that biases, and that's why I wanted to do it. It actually happened as I went. I'm going to start with a little story. So it was back in 2014. I just finished my master's without any understanding what I need to do in the future, because it was so much, and there weren't a lot of avenues for young scientists to go and get it, kind of a thing, because you need a lot of networks, you need a lot of support, specifically in the area of conservation, where you have to go to the field all the time. Invariably, it is absolutely important for you to go to the field and collect your data or run this project. So there weren't a lot of people doing that in Bangladesh, especially with marine sciences. So limited number of predecessors to look up to. So I had no clue. But I remember I went to Cox's Bazar, and it was just a visit. It wasn't a work visit. And I went to the fishing landing site where all the fish, are landed after they're being caught. And to my utter surprise, there were thousands of sharks and rays which were, landed. I'm a fisheries student, and I studied fisheries for 5 years from my undergrad to my master's level, but I never knew. And you can imagine a student who have been studying fisheries for 5 years had no idea what's going on with sharks and rays in your own country. Gives you an idea how much we haven't done. There are Department of Fisheries in Bangladesh for decades. And in every paper that you read, a common sentence is, it is a data poor fishery. And my question was, well, you have been working here at least for 40 years, and if still the fishery is data poor, there must be something we're not doing right. And from there, my journey started. And I actually wasn't looking at all those equity or inclusion problems, because I was very head straight and I'm strong that I need to do something around that. But while I started doing that, came the problems and things that I have learned or felt about diversity problems or inclusions, or even the feeling of belonging to something. That started with one question. I remember I was in one of the conferences, and I was presenting some of my work, and there was another lady scientist, a female scientist, came up to me and actually asked, did you really go to the field yourself and collected all those data? It needs for you to be in the field for at least half the year. Did you really do it? And it wasn't just a question. There were a lot of subtext, a lot of presumptions that a woman, a young woman, probably wouldn't have done it in a context of Bangladesh. And all those problems are so, embedded into your subconscious that sometimes you need some time to understand, well, something wrong just happened here, because you need to be introduced with these problems from a societal perspective. So yeah, it didn't start with the idea of, do something around diversity or inclusion, but I did feel those problems around that. But interestingly, even in the global South, in shark sciences, you would be seeing a lot of females coming up, being very headstrong. They want to do what they want to do. And one thing that I have learned very early is that I can't take on every fight there is. I need to choose my fights and prioritize
Battles, as they say. You have to pick your battles and move on.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, something that you said, which I understood, is that based on your experience, you didn't set out intentionally to be a trailblazer, but you became one along the way, and you hadn't anticipated in some ways the issues without actually being part of it. And that has happened to me, where I feel like sometimes I learn through doing, and I don't anticipate a lot of challenges, or I haven't thought it out, and it may actually be for the benefit, because sometimes when we focus too much on the limitations, we are so scared off by them that we may not even want to do them. So in a way, it's better we face them and figure it out as we go along and do it better next time, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
what do you feel about that? Do you think that's what do you feel about that approach?
I
overall?
totally agree with you. Sometimes you react better when it's very instinctive, rather than you're prepared for something that you have. Sometimes I have been in positions where I reacted better when the problem came, rather than I was totally prepared, or said, prepared something that, well, if this question comes along, I'm going to answer like this. That never happens, because these reactions to problem solving or dealing with something when you are at the field, it's something that you learn through the process. You would make mistakes. The first 2 times, it's not going to get right, but the third time it's going to be right, and it comes with experience as you go. So I totally agree.
Sounds good. So let me ask you this question. With all of my guests for this series, I'm noticing that the same type of issues are showing up in very different workplaces of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So what would you say are some unique challenges, according to you, presented in your field? When it comes to you and your identity and what you identify as well as anyone who's from historically marginalized groups trying to do work in a field that is already sort of underknown and underexplored by people?
It's a very difficult question to answer, but I would try to deal with a little bit of it. The problem in a country where, or I don't know, I can't speak for all countries, but for example, in Bangladesh, in an academic setting where I come from, a very privileged background, I got the chance to, study. I had my professors, I had my family to back me up. You wouldn't find it with a lot of women in Bangladesh, even if they have the capacity or the dreams to do something different, or even be in the mainstream workplaces. So I probably don't represent every one of them, but I was very privileged, right? Still, I did feel a lot of problems that I had to deal with while doing what I am doing. There aren't a lot of marine scientists in Bangladesh. You wouldn't find a lot of them conducting field work, not because they don't want to, but because it's very difficult for a woman to go to a field, not from the perspective of they don't have the capacity, but from the perspective of access. So the access of transportation, the access of security at the field, the idea that an institution is invariably going to support a woman because probably they need some different sorts of opportunities to be able to accessing those kind of field work or even running projects. So that setup isn't there. It's somehow expected and embedded into a conversation or dialogue within an academic setting that maybe males are going to do field work and that sort of work. The females probably are going to do lab work and stuff that doesn't need to do with, deal with a lot of field work and stuff like that. And it's so embedded, the idea that even the woman that I have seen, my predecessors probably trust and believe that well, it's difficult, I'm not going to go and collect the data, there are students, there are males, they're going to do it, and I'm going to analyze it to probably do the field, lab work. And I'm not saying lab work is not important, but this idea is still there. And that I'm talking for the women who are privileged in perspective of Bangladesh, and now you can think about the women who are not. So yes, these are there, so when I started, the first problem that I felt was how am I gonna go to a field site which takes at least 12 hours to reach, and all the buses are at night. Such a simple thing, but then again, it made you do some extra work that probably a male doesn't have to do. So I had to put extra logistic work that probably that time could have gone to something, I don't know, reading, doing a better field work, giving more time at data collection, but I had to do all that. And even staying there, I never, and it's very interesting that I never felt that kind of unequal behavior from the people that I collect the data from. So for example, the fishers, I was respected. I had amazing connections with them, but the problem that I felt was from my own fellow, sometimes some colleagues, or the setting. I would say, even if a colleague wanted to help you, I think systematically and institutionally, that support wasn't there for you to, for the supports that you need to get there. So as I said, it's a problem that is getting solved through the process of doing it, because sometimes some biases are so subconscious you don't even know that they exist until you somehow someone tells you, like, see, this is something wrong is happening. So yeah, we have a long way to go in that. Yeah,
sounds good. So you gave a really nice look into Bangladeshi society when it came to the intersections of privilege and class and gender. I'm curious to know how you feel about the representation of conservation work in Western and Northern media. So for example, whenever we look at conservation narratives and environmental narratives and sustainability narratives, you hear of a lot of Northern Western voices. They're often white, they're often male, and they're often white female. For example, Greta Thunberg is an example. So what's your take on your work being highlighted, and what are some of the challenges that you face or in a global sphere when it comes to inclusion in your field? Or do you feel any?
Yeah.
Or yeah, I guess I don't want to ask.
I know what you mean. And I just want to start with this. There's something called a parachute science, right? Where the Western or Northern scientist would collaborate with someone from the global South.
I actually didn't know. I actually don't know what parachute science is.
Okay.
Please tell us, what is it?
Yeah, so it's when you collaborate with someone who probably in the power hierarchy is lower than you, and you collect a lot of data or you conduct your project and everything, but never give enough credit to that person who you have collaborated with. because of the presumption that that person is from the South and probably are not as equipped in terms of science, language, research, and everything as a Western or Northern scientist. And that happened a lot in South Asia, in Asian countries, or even, in our part of the world, where a Western scientist would collaborate with you, but you would never get that credit in papers, in media, or even in the next phase of the project. You are not leading the project, although you are a very important part of what's been happening. And there is a lot of debate going around right now where a lot of South Asian scientists, women scientists, are voicing their problems around that. A lot of the time, this scientists are thought as logistic partners rather than equals in terms of conceptualizing the question, even collecting the data, analyzing it, and writing the paper. And the presumptions are bad. You would think that they would think that your language is bad. Probably you're not equipped to write good English or something like that. Or your analysis capacity is bad because you are not equipped with all those softwares and trainings and stuff like that. So horribly bad. That happens with scientists from our part of the world for a long time. So yes. And the representation, when you asked about media representations, I was lucky because I partnered with some of the organizations who champions on diversity and equity and inclusion, like National Geographic. So they would be finding people who need that support to, exhibit their work, to feature in different magazines or social media or the network that they need for further work. So I got some of that, but the main problem there is as well that it needs to be inherent, and it needs to be naturally coming rather than you picking that, well, I need to do some inclusion work. Let's pick 5 scientists from the South Asia and feature them. It's almost like reiterating the problem that this problem exists. It needs to be inherently coming. The support and the system, it needs to be there for a scientist to go and get the support and get all those media supports that they need. And I also think it's extremely difficult for one person to handle grant writing, doing the field work, making a media presence, and also writing the report and the paper and everything else and prepare for the next year. It's almost too much for one person to do. So you need to have those systems in place where you do your job and the rest is done by your support system or institutionally done. And that's where I also think a lot of the South Asian or scientists from our part of the world lacks, where that time, juggling that time that you need to write a nice post for your Twitter, for your Instagram, write a blog, post it somewhere, and also do the job that you're doing at field at your university research institution. It's a lot of problem together. You can't really solve it with one or silver bullet. But you pointed it right, that happens. Yeah. If that answers your question.
Yeah, and it does. And I think you brought something very important, that one person cannot solve the whole mess of a problem that is systemic, which is that one person can't do their publicity, their research, their grant writing, like the whole process. There needs to be a team, and there needs to be a structure that actually supports the person to go forward. Yeah. So there is something to learn. And what I also wanted to ask you is, you said that you build partnerships, say, for example, with National Geographic. I'm sure that newbies who want to break into your field in sustainability and conservation work, what advice would you give them about building partnerships and seeking out diverse media representation outlets and research outlets that would actually be supportive of new talent that is diverse and from places that are historically marginalized?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, the first and simple advice is that don't be afraid to reach out. find your peers, find people. And it's so easy right now because of social media. Every conservationist, almost everyone has some sort of a social presence. So don't afraid to reach out to a person you think can be your peer. Write an email, text, build those connections, seek for advice, and start those connections. So one thing that I always used to do is to write even like an email appreciating someone doing something. So I'd probably write an email to like a famous conservationist writing, well, I've just seen that you have done this. This is amazing work, something to look forward to. These are little bits where, you know, you find those networks of people. You can also write like, see, I have been doing this for the last 6 months, but I don't know what to do with this. And I know that you do that sort of work. Can we collaborate? Can you help me with something like that? And trust me, there are people there would love to help you out. Maybe not everyone, but you are going to find those people. Apart from that, at this point of time, there are a lot of organizations who are actually supporting young scientists, specifically females, because we do not need that extra support at this point of time, like National Geographic, Save Our Seas Foundations, specifically for ocean work or marine sciences, and so many fellowships available who are targeting for young people to come in with newer ideas, with innovative ways of problem solving to change the model of conservation because it's not working so far. So it's there. I think just don't be afraid, reach out to people, look for those avenues, and be sure of the idea that if you think there is a problem that you want to work on, there is a problem. You do not need someone in the upper hand to tell you, well, you are doing right. Maybe not a lot of people are going to tell you this. So if you think there is a problem, reach out to people and you are going to get help.
Sounds good. Sounds good. What are some of your upcoming projects looking like in the coming years?
Yeah.
What's cooking?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say, but what I can say is that what we want for Bangladesh at this point of time is that having a platform where research is done and practiced in the field for evidence-based conservation in marine sciences. And we want to start that in Bangladesh. We want to create that platform where whatever solutions we are giving or proposing are based on absolute sound science and understanding, and not from a very top-down kind of a method. And we want to create that. That's the first goal. And if I be very specific, in the coming 5 years, what we want to do is we want to see the fishers who are we working with have enough access to information, finances, incentives, and alternative livelihoods for adhering to fisheries regulations through different kinds of problem solving. That's what we are looking at, and that's what I want to achieve for sharks and rays in Bangladesh, so that all these arbitrary policies, umbrella bans are discarded, and we have a more context appropriate, equal, fishers in the table kind of a policy for ultimate conservation of this species in Bangladesh.
Sounds good. So basically what you're saying is even in your research design, you're looking for inclusion, equity, and access and belonging.
Absolutely. Core
That's
to it.
Core to it is exactly the whole process of participatory, diverse, equity, inclusion, community-based rather than the top-down method. What was the term that you used that I'm sure the audience would be interested in knowing? I wasn't familiar with it. The umbrella brand?
Umbrella ban. So it's like if you want to protect a certain group of species, you're not looking at species specific need, you're banning everything, and that doesn't help. So for example, in Bangladesh, we have more than 110 species of sharks and rays, and not all species can, the resilience of each species is different to fisheries. Now, as you don't want to do the science, and as you don't want to make it very complicated in terms of policies, you want to ban catching everything. Now that doesn't work because fishers depend on some of these fisheries. That doesn't work because it is impossible to identify all 90 species, all 100 species, and see, there are problems. So,
be more nuanced with policy making is what you're saying, rather than having like extreme solutions that are not contextually relevant or even creating issues for the livelihoods of the fishermen whose lives are depending on fishing. Pretty much.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't work because you don't get any compliance from people. Awareness doesn't happen if it is not accepted by the people, right? And awareness is not about information sharing. It's about if a person accepts what you are saying and, takes it as a livelihood option or behavioral change. That's awareness. And if you want to do it, you need to be nuanced. You need to understand these people and the species all together. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't have those very simple policies where you ban everything, rather than you need to go to that complicated pathways because your problem is complicated. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Sounds good. No, it makes total sense. And that's why I wanted you to follow up and explain a little bit on the concept. Last question, and this really should have been the first question. And the reason why I'm asking it at the end is because I realize how much you're invested in this. Is what got you interested in the first place in your career? What was it that sparked? What made you? Because my assumption is, from what I know about you, is that you grew up in Dhaka City, which is the capital, which is not near Cox's Bazar, which is by the ocean. So I'm just curious, and I'm sure the audience is, what sparked the interest in the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, it started in 2014. As you said, I grew up in Dhaka, and there wasn't even a pond, let alone something like
I guess there aren't many ponds left in Dhaka City.
Oh, there aren't. So I was like any city kid, didn't have much understanding about our natural world. And because I didn't have access to all those informations, I didn't even know something like a conservationist exists up until my 12th, which is a shame. But what happened in 2014 is that I did my master's in biodiversity conservation in Oxford, and we had a professor. His name was Alex Rogers, and he used to go into the Western Indian Ocean with a submarine and used to go underwater and find all those ecosystems that were never been discovered before, and species. And he used to show us all those videos. And imagine a person never knew what happens in the sea, sitting in an Oxford room. A person is talking about something so amazing, and instantly would feel like, well, I need a submarine. That was my goal, that I need a submarine. I want to go under the sea and see what happens. And the first thing I did, so I returned to Dhaka, I remember October 2014, and late October went to Cox's Bazar to see what's happening in our seas. What can we do in terms of marine work in Bangladesh? And I was heartbroken because we don't have the time for a submarine. We first need to know what we have and what's happening in terms of fisheries in Bangladesh. And that's how it all started. It was the awe of the idea of so many species are being landed without any understanding of what's happening. Nobody knows about it. No global understanding, no local understanding. And the first feeling, you would think, oh my God, why fishers are catching them? But when you sit with these fishers, when you have a cup of tea with them, you would know that how socially complicated the whole thing is. It's not only about species. It's not only about people who care about them. It's a whole other ball game about species and people and their connections. And it drew me like something. I was instantly drawn by that idea that I need to understand more and I need to do more. And I remember I didn't have any funding for the first 2 years, no research question. I just used to be in the coastline of Bangladesh. I remember going to Cox's Bazar 13 times in 1 month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just looking at stuff. I used to sit there and see what's happening. And that gave me the, trust among these people. that I used to get calls from these people as saying, well, you are not here, but we just caught a shark. Do you want to see it? Sending me photos. And that made my life easier because I had that trusted relationship with these people. And also in terms of, feeling of belonging. I do feel very, very good when I'm amongst fishers and in the field. And that's how it started and never stopped.
13 times in 1 month.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And you went all the way from Dhaka each time?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry. That is passion and I love it. And it's really interesting because similar things have happened to me about projects that I have been passionate about, is that sometimes I know what is the thing I want to do, but I don't have any clear research questions and it emerges over time.
Exactly.
And you just go back to the project over and over again and think things through and think things out. And it formulates and it creates and it emerges, but you need to sort of immerse yourself in the environment and let it process. But yep, 13 times in a month. That's pretty good. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, because I had to work as well. So it was like every other day I'm traveling. So.
Sounds good. And of course, Cox's Bazar isn't exactly a bad place to be 13 times a month. So, well, any lasting thoughts you want to give our audience about the field of sustainability, about your work, about where we want to go to follow your work? I know you said that you don't have a centralized website yet, but please tell us social media, any recent features, anything that you would want our audience to know about conservation work, about you and the projects that you do in Bangladesh, and anyone whose projects you want us to know about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my last thoughts, it's regarding sustainability. I think we are still learning about sustainability. It seems like a word we're still defining. And there are a lot of avenues that hasn't been really looked at in the understanding of sustainability. So if you ask me what sustainability is, you're going to get an answer. But if you ask a fisher, and I'm talking about fishers a lot because I work with them, it's different. The wordings, the ideas, and necessarily they're not wrong, but probably have a different understanding. So I would not suggest, I would just say that people who are working around sustainability, it's not the same for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. It depends on what questions you're dealing with, what people you're dealing with, what works for your particular problem. It's never going to be the same, or it's never going to be what's written in the FAO documents. So this is something we always need to remember, that whatever the problem we are dealing with, it's unique, it has a context, it needs to be understood from different perspective, and it's all right to be wrong, and then formulating as you go in terms of how things are going to be sustainable for the future. That's what I learned so far, and I'm sure I'm going to learn more throughout this process. About my work, we do have a YouTube page called Bengal Elasmo Lab. It's new. We are just uploading little bits of pieces of our work in there. You can go and see. There are, I think, 1 documentary so far in there. Apart from that, you could Google my funder pages, for example, Alifa Haq in Save Foundation, or Shark Conservation Fund, or National Geographic, and you'd be finding pages where some of our works are being featured using blogs or even project pages. Yeah, I mean, that's it at this point of time, but we do plan to create one more concentrated platform where everything is featured, everyone in our team is featured. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Alifa, for being on our show and giving a perspective on conservation work, environment, and sustainability from a perspective that is not concentrated in the global north. And I really, really appreciated being a person from environmental communication and overall working on issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that the world is hungry to know fields that are underrepresented by non-dominant groups in doing work. And I'm really, really happy that I was able to get you into telling us about all the stories about the Bay of Bengal and its fishers and fisheries and sharks and rays in Bangladesh. Exciting stuff. So thank you. And I will hope to see you again on our show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was amazing. I love to talk about sharks and rays and fishers. So I'm sure you understood by now. So thank you for this opportunity. I think I really love talking to you. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.